Palestine, or the occupied state of Palestine. Palestine is an Arab and a Muslim majority state situated in Middle East. Its neighbor countries are Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. The total population of Palestine is 4.6 million. 95% people of Palestine are Muslims, while 5% people are Christians and Jews. The literacy rate in Palestine is 97%. Theoretically, Palestine consists of Gaza Strip and West Bank, but most of its region is occupied by Israel. It has no army. It is under the control of Israeli forces, so it is politically unstable. There isn't any law and order situation in the state of Palestine. Israeli people are also getting settled in the Palestinian regions. History of Palestine. The term Palestine first appeared in the 5th century BC when the ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a district of Syria called Palestine. Throughout the history, Palestine has been ruled by numerous groups including the Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Fatimids, Seljuk Turks, Crusaders, Egyptians, and Mamluks. In the well-known history, the Ottoman Empire ruled much of this region from about 1517 to 1917. Arab people of this territory were known as Palestinians. When the Ottoman Empire ended with the World War I in 1918, the British took control of Palestine. British took provisions for establishing a Jewish national homeland in Palestine, which went into effect in 1923. Jews from different regions of the world came and settled there. After more than 2 decades of British rule, in 1947 the United Nations proposed a plan to partition the Palestine into 2 sections. One an independent Jewish state and other an independent Arab state. Israel becomes a state. In May 1948, less than a year after the partition plan for Palestine was introduced, Britain withdrew from Palestine and Israel declared itself an independent state, implying a willingness to implement the partition plan. Israel is a country in Western Asia. It is situated on the southeastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea and the northern shore of the Red Sea. It shares borders with the Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, and Egypt. Tel Aviv is the economic and technological center of the country. Israel is the only Jewish state. Its official language is Hebrew and its currency is Israeli shekel. Israel is a fastly developing country with the modern technology. There were always conflicts between Palestine and Israel. Israel has a strong army while Palestine has no army. Currently, Israel has occupied most of the Palestinian lands. Importance of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a city which was claimed by both the Jews and the Palestinian Arabs. Jerusalem was meant to be an international territory with a special status. This is because it is considered holy in the three major monotheistic religions, which are Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Jerusalem is currently located in Palestine, or you can say the modern day Israel, because it is under the Israeli occupation. Both the countries, Palestine and Israel, have claimed Jerusalem as their capital. Because of these strong and age-old associations, bloody conflicts to control the city and sites within it have been waged for thousands of years. The Temple Mount is a compound located on a hill in Jerusalem that's comprised of about 35 acres of land. It contains religious structures such as the Western Wall, the Dome of the Rock, and Al-Aqsa Mosque. In 691 AD, the Dome of the Rock, a gold-domed Islamic shrine, was built on the site of the destroyed Jewish temples in Jerusalem. It's the oldest surviving Islamic building and was constructed at the very site where Muslims believed Muhammad Prophet ﷺ ascended to the heaven. A silver-domed mosque called Al-Aqsa sits adjacent to the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. Both structures are considered holy to the Muslims. Western Wall or the Wailing Wall. The Western Wall is a section of ancient remnant wall from the Second Jewish Temple. It's located on the western side of the Temple Mount and is sometimes referred to as the Wailing Wall because many Jews pray and weep at the site of the destroyed temple. Another holy significant site in the Jerusalem is Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built in 335 AD, is the site where many Christians believe Jesus was crucified and where his resurrection occurred. It's located in the Christian quarter of Jerusalem.
After the World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. The French and the British Empire control over the Middle East, and the control on the Palestine was taken by the Britishers. First, the Britishers allowed to migrate the Jews in Palestine. About 10,000 of Jews migrated towards the Palestine, but when the number of Jews increased in Palestine, the act of violence occurs between the Jews and Arabs. So, in 1930, Britishers limits the migration of Jews. Then come the Holocaust, where many more Jews were killed. In the result of Holocaust, they show themselves as the most oppressed people in the world. As a result, they gain the support of the West. In 1947, after the act of violences, the Britishers approved a plan to divide the Palestine, one for the Jews, Israel, and one for the Arabs, Palestine. The Jerusalem have equally respectful to the Arabs, Jews, and Christians. So this zone was declared as the international zone. The Britishers leave this issue unresolved, and this caused major conflicts between Arabs and the Jews. This UN proposal was accepted by the Jews, but the Palestinians and the other Arab states like Egypt, Syria, Jordan reject this proposal. They declared the war on the Israel to form a unified Palestine. But the new state of Israel won this war with the help of the West. After that war, the map was changed. The Israel took control on the Palestine area, which was also declared in the proposal. After the war, the Israel displaced thousands of the Palestinians into their neighbor countries. the Arab of Palestine moves towards the neighbor countries like Gaza, Egypt, Jordan, Western Bank, and Syria. After the war, the small area of Gaza was controlled by the Egypt, and West Bank was controlled by the Jordan. This was the beginning of the decades-long Arab-Israel conflict. Then something new happens. In 1967, the Arab states united again and attacked on Israel. When this war ended, Israel took control on the huge areas of Syria, West Bank from Jordan, and a large area of Egypt. Now Israel was occupying all of the Palestine. And this Palestinian territory also includes the Jerusalem. Israel took control over the large area of Misr, Syria, and Jordan for many of the decades. In 1978, Israel signed a proposal with Egypt with the help of USA called Camp David Accord, and there leaves the controls on the area of Egypt. But immediately after that, the president of Egypt, the Ahmed Sadat, was also assassinated. After that, for the next few decades, the Arab states make peace with Israel, even they did not have any peace treaty between them. Still, Israel occupied the West Bank and on Gaza. And after that, a group was formed known as the Palestinian Liberation Army that was formed in 1960 under the leadership of Yasser Arafat. They start attacking on the Israeli army, and their fight go on for many of the years. And then, in 1982, Israel-Lebanon conflict starts. Then a new thing occurred. The Israel government moves the peoples to the West Bank and in Gaza. This was the occupied area in which, according to the UN, the people have the right to vote if they want freedom or they want to stay with Israel. And Israel have the plan to change the majority of the Arab Muslim in the minority. This was a religious as well as a political issue because of the Jerusalem. The Israel put their forces in the occupied land of Palestine. They divided the community of Palestine, and this was much more painful to the peoples of Palestine. They have to face many of the difficulties because of this single problem. Today, there are several of thousands of the Jews who settled in the occupied territory of Palestine. And then in 1987, the frustration of the people of Palestine exploded. They began with the protest and boycott. Due to this, Israel responded with a great army. Couple of Jews and thousands of the Arabs died in this conflict. After that, some leaders from the PLO left and created a separate group known as Hamas, and they gave tough time to the Israel army. They start attacking on the Israeli army, and they also perform some suicide bomb attacks on Israel. And then in early 1990s, Israel and the Arab make the peace. Leaders of the both sides signed an Oslo Accord. The Oslo Accord established and accepts the Palestinian Authority on the Palestine. The Israeli army took control over some of the areas and gave it to the Palestine. Due to this, the internal peace was at the great risk in Israel. Israelis starts a protest and take out rallies and call their prime minister a traitor. The same situation was in Palestinian Arabs, and after a little time, the rabbin was assassinated by the students in a rally. This shows the extremeness of the Jews. They carry on the violence, so the conflict between the two going on. Then the other accord of Camp David II was signed in 2000. But again, after a short period of time, the conflict again started. This was much more violent than any other before. In this conflict, about 1,000 of the Jews and 3,200 Palestinians died. As a result, the Israeli army took more violent steps against the Palestinians. The Israeli army put more restrictions on the Palestinian Arabs. They created checkpoints, walls to control the Palestinians. So Israel made the Gaza the world's largest open prison by making the walls. But they were not succeeded to make the peace, and this created much more violence. Then in 2005, Israel withdraws from the Gaza and Hamas came to power. Hamas came to the power, they started to help the people in West Bank, the occupied Palestine. So the Israel put Gaza under the wall cage, and due to this, unemployment reached to the about 40%. And this is the conflict from then till today. This was really unbearable for the people of Palestine. The protests and sometimes violences were held in the West Bank, the occupied Palestine. While in Gaza, Hamas and other groups were giving tough time to Israel. In this fight, Hamas attacked on Israel, and as a result, the Jews attacked on the unarmed Arabs of Palestine. The Jews become more apathetic and create much more violences against the Arabs Palestinians. Until now, no one knows how long this conflict is. Israeli occupation in Palestine is unbearable for the whole of the world. Now the world is awakening, and they are against the Israel occupation of Palestine. The real and accurate news of the Israel-Palestine conflict are now coming in front of the world, and the world is awakening now.
We'll discuss about current situation on Israel and Palestine issue, world's reaction on Israel and Palestine issue. First of all, we will discuss current situation of Israel and Palestine issue. It began early on Friday, 7th May. Muslim worshippers in Al-Aqsa Mosque were attacked by Israeli forces who shot rubber bullets and stun grenades on them. An Israeli airstrike destroyed a high-rise building in Gaza City that housed offices of the Associated Press and other media outlets on Saturday. There was no immediate explanation for why it was attacked. In Palestine, 17 medical facilities were bombed. At least 1,000 buildings, including homes, offices of media companies, and Gaza's single coronavirus testing facility had also been destroyed by Israel. The Gaza Ministry of Health reported that more than 1,900 Palestinians were injured. Hamas tried to retaliate Israel's forces by firing rockets, but most of the rockets were intercepted by the Iron Dome defense system of Israel. Ending 11 days of brutality of Israel, in which more than 250 people, including 65 children, were killed. The Israeli government and the Islamist Palestinian group Hamas agreed to a ceasefire agreement last week, after 11 days of relentless bombardment which began on 10 May. Israel has temporarily opened a crossing into Gaza, allowing food, fuel, and medicine into the territory. Israel has also lifted emergency restrictions inside its own border. After the ceasefire, both Israel and Hamas claimed victory in the conflict. Now we will discuss about world's reaction on Israel and Palestine issue. All the Arab states as well as non-Muslim states condemned Israel's brutality against Palestinians, but only a few states took actions against Israel. Turkey expelled Israel's ambassador and withdrew its ambassador. Bahrain banned imports from Israel. The international media is reporting this issue according to Israel's point of view. Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, in an interview to CNN News, called Israel deep pockets, as they have a lot of connections with the media. Solidarity protests are being held all over the world in favor of Palestine. China will send assistance to help the injured and find new accommodation for those left homeless because of the Israeli air attacks on Gaza. China will provide a cash transfer of $1 million to Palestine as an emergency humanitarian aid. About 200,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines will also be donated to Palestine by China.
Now the eyes of the world are open, and they see the terrorist as a traitor and a terrorist country. And due to this, the people in the world came out on the streets. They came on streets, bring up large and huge rallies, and pressurize the government to stop the aid that they are giving to the Israel. And some of the examples of the world large rallies are in Washington DC, in the Germany, and every capital of the world. In Germany, the youth of the Cologne city displayed the Palestine flag on the bank of Rhine River. Also, some models, some stars and celebrities come in the favor of Palestine, and they took over the voice in the favor of Palestine. This whole situation come in front of the world because of some of the Arab vloggers and some Arab journalists. They work a lot and bring this situation in front of the world. They capture the videos of the falling buildings and the attacks that were held by Israel on the Palestine in the camera and bring these videos in the front of the world. This was a slap on the international media societies like CNN, BBC, etc., which claim that all Israel in Palestine, or they show that Arabs are the traitors and they are threatening the peace of Israel. These were all the difficulties that were faced by the Palestinian Arabs, but they did not go there in front of the Israel. They took up the dead bodies of their relatives, their loved ones. The Israel warned the other Muslim countries to stay beside them. They warned other Muslim countries to turn up their voice for them, but unfortunately this was not done. Many of the countries, including the Arab countries, did not voice up their voice because of some of their political issues. Only a few countries will voice up their voice for the Palestinian Arabs, which includes Mahathir bin Mohamad, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Iran Prime Minister, and Pakistan Foreign Minister Shah Mahmoud Qureshi, and Turkey Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan. They rose up their voice on international platforms, and due to their efforts, the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. The ceasefire is done between the Israel and Hamas, but it is a shameful act for the Muslim countries that they did not work for the Palestinian people and they are in great difficulty. Besides all, the Jerusalem is the Qibla Awwal of Islam, and we have to work hard to free it from the traitors of Jews.